The trade deadline is officially 2 weeks away. So where do the Magic stand and why this deadline is so important today on Locked On Magic?
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is January 22nd. It will be January 23rd, 2025. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the senior writer over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD and on Blue Sky at PhilipRR. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we are joined by Keith Smith of Spotrac to talk about the Orlando Magic strategy at the trade deadline 2 weeks ago till the trade deadline, what the Magic should be looking for, what the Magic should be thinking, and why this transaction period, whether it's now or in the offseason, is a must-act time for the Magic. We'll get to that, plus some big news coming up here in just a moment. First, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. No matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload, we truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. And you can make Locked On Magic even bigger part of your day with the Locked On Magic daily newsletter. It's the one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Magic newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Before we get to Keith, I waited to record the intro. I would have recorded it right after I was done with Keith, be able to preview some things on the show, that I had to wait for the injury report. And on the 5 o'clock injury report for the Orlando Magic, there's still a lot of guys out, still a lot of guys questionable. But there is change. There is news. Franz Wagner has been officially upgraded to questionable in his return to competition reconditioning, suggesting, and I'm recording this before Shams breaks anything, before the Magic break anything, suggesting Franz Wagner could return Thursday against the Portland Trailblazers. This is a big step. It means that we are very close to Franz Wagner's return. Now, could this be we're making him questionable because we might need to have someone available to reach the minimum of 8 players available? Sure. Cole Anthony is still questionable with an illness. Jonathan Isaac is questionable with an illness. Gary Harris and Jet Howard remain questionable with their injuries. Goga Bitadze actually upgraded to doubtful under the concussion protocol, and while that would suggest he will not play on Thursday, certainly trending in the right direction that he is getting through the concussion protocol and could be available Saturday for the game against the Detroit Pistons. The point is, so many things the Magic have struggled with over the last 2.5 weeks are directly related to the injuries. As much as the Magic don't want to use that as an excuse or say that this is the reason we're struggling right now, we can't deny that injuries have played a huge role in this team and where this team is at. But there is and does seem to be relief coming soon. And of course, stick with us. We will recap the game on Thursday. We'll talk about Franz Wagner's status more when we hear from the Magic on Thursday. They traveled back from Toronto. They were off on Wednesday. We'll catch you up on all that tomorrow. Today, I want to focus on the trade deadline because the Magic are and should be heavy actors in the trade deadline. They should be a team that is trying to make things happen. And so with that, we bring in our annual discussion with Keith Smith of Spotrac to discuss where the Magic are at, what their cap situation is, and how the Magic should be acting at this year's trade deadline. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. And I am joined now by our good friend, Keith Smith of Spotrac. I always mess up the pronunciation.
You got it. Spotrac.
I got it. Yes. I'm joined by Keith Smith of Spotrac during this very, very busy time. We are exactly, as this is going to be published Wednesday night, Thursday morning, we are exactly 2 weeks away from the NBA trade deadline. The Magic are in a position to maybe be buyers, but very, very interesting time around the league, as it always is. Keith, before we do that, How are you doing? How's the exchange rate on first round picks these days?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah, exchange rate on first round picks. We apparently 3 for 1, as long as one might be really good and is really far away. As we found out last night. So that was kind of came out of nowhere. But the Suns, dude, I know this is not Locked On Suns, but they've been super creative with the way they've kind of put together all these draft pick related trades over the last few years, including Horcruxing up some of their swap rights and the like to collect second round picks and all that stuff. So yeah, there was a fun little wrinkle, but yeah, and then things are good. I'm marking the Foundation Academy hat for those local to Central Florida. District playoffs start tomorrow for our daughter's soccer team. So go Lions.
Go Lions. Go Lions indeed, as long as they're not facing Lake Highland, which might be in a nearby district or classification, if I'm not mistaken. Seeing that, we're not going to dive too deep into that Phoenix deal, but seeing them make that pick swap, do that deal with Utah, oh man, that made me want to go fish out, like, what were the protections on that Magic Wizards Suns pick that they have in like 2-3 years or whatever it is. You don't need to look it up, Keith. Do not look that up, please. I'm going to spend my time figuring that out.
That would be, we'd be here the rest of the day untangling that mess.
Yeah, but let's dive right into it. Trade deadline is coming up in two weeks. The Orlando Magic are not where they want to be in the standings. They were sitting pretty happy in fourth for most of the season. They've hit this really rough patch. Injuries have taken over the roster. They've fallen down to 7th in the Eastern Conference. They're behind the Atlanta Hawks by percentage points. Still got 4 games against them. There is still a long way to go in the season. So before we even get to the kind of big picture stuff that the Magic have to do, if as an executive or as someone like looking at this trade market, how do you assess where the Magic are at and what they need to do this trade deadline, considering pointing everywhere, everything that's happened?
Yeah, I think if I was in Orlando's front office, the conversations that need to be had are, first, are we getting our guys back? Some of them, yes, right? We know Mo Wagner's not coming back, but we're going to get Franz back. We're going to get Suggs back. When? And then the more important question is that going to fix what has ailed us here, especially in the last, let's call it 2 to 3 weeks? And you have to be super honest, and I trust that they will be. I think they've been pretty spot on with where the team has been at in the past with various things. So I think that's the question. Then the next question is, all right, if that doesn't fix us, then it kind of goes question A, question B. Question A is, should we pursue fixing this right now, or is that a later problem? And if you do say yes, we should pursue, then where do we go? And I think that's what you have to be just extremely honest with yourself. And then the last part of that, if you decide, all right, we are going to go about making this move, who becomes the guys we're open to trading? Who are the guys we're open to trading? Who are the guys that are? I think fans get very confused, misguided. Our fandom enters in big time for everybody, where we think every team has like 5 untouchable guys, and there's like maybe 10 total in the entire NBA. And that's where, hard to trade would need a lot to trade. Those are very different than untouchable. And I think that's what Orlando's probably sitting down and saying, all right, which ones are the young guys? Which ones are the guys on long-term contracts? Who are we open to moving? And you have to have that clarity here going into the next 2 weeks, because you have an opportunity here to do something kind of big, where everything points right now to this being a little bit more of a kind of marginal moves around the edges of the roster type of summer. You could do it right now, unless you're going to make the big trade come July.
Yeah, and it's really difficult, and we'll talk more about a little bit later on how aggressive the Magic need to be at this stage, and I think there are several factors that suggest that it's going to, a big trade or a big move to advance this team forward is coming, if it, not either at this deadline or in the offseason. It really does feel like that timing is ripe to kind of to kind of force something to happen. But yeah, you're like you said, it's really tough to evaluate what you've seen this season so far. Like, you survived the injuries for the most part. It hasn't been until now when there's 8 available players that you kind of started to look like how you feared you were going to look like when you lost Paolo Banchero in October, let alone losing Franz Wagner in December. This is kind of what you feared these last 2 months were going to be like. And the fact that the Magic held that boat steady, were kind of still on the same pace, had this elite defense, really suggested that whatever problems they have, and I think we'll discuss in a little bit the short and long-term problems this team is facing, that this team has enough to accomplish your goals for this year. I tend to, and tell me if you agree or disagree with this, I tend to think teams that make trades at the trade deadline are really working on 2 things. They're either looking to make sure they accomplish short-term goals. If you're a championship contender, you're adding that last player you need to get you over the hump. Like, think what Dallas did last year. They had Luka Doncic. They go out, they're aggressive. They get Daniel Gafford. They get PJ Washington. And that was, very much kind of the last piece that got them over the hump to be an NBA Finals team last year. Or you're preparing for your summer. You're setting yourself up for your offseason. You're a team like, we know what they're doing. The Chicago Bulls. They got a lot. They're kind of.
We hope at least for Bulls fans.
This is if the Bulls were not run by Jerry Reinsdorf, they've been spinning their wheels in the play-in for 3, 4, 5 years now. They've got some players playing very, very well. It feels like this is the time to kind of set the table straight, to kind of clear the table. I don't know if you listened to the True Hoop podcast and what they had to say about trading Paolo. That was a dumb idea, but their idea that you trade early to net assets before the market kind of sets itself, before everyone knows you have to make that trade. That's kind of what you have to do. You set, that's what Jeff Weltman did with Nikola Vucevic. Everyone knew the Magic were trading Evan Fournier. Everyone knew the Magic were trading Aaron Gordon. No one knew they were trading Nikola Vucevic, and look at the return they got for him. That's kind of, you're again, just back to the main point, you're either trying to shore up your short-term goals or you're setting up your offseason. The Magic are obviously in this weird place because they don't quite know how good their team is, really. So yes, there are short-term goals to accomplish and things they need to fix, but with the Magic kind of still in this weird space of trying to let young guys develop and to kind of see how they've grown with Paolo and Franz together, because they played 5 games together. Franz was sick for a good chunk of them. Franz really emerged after Paolo went out. Do the Magic have, how do the Magic approach this deadline? Is this a deadline to kind of make those short-term moves to secure their spot in the playoffs? Or is this a deadline to think about setting up your summer and what comes next?
Yeah, I'm going to take any of the crazy suggestions of start trading guys, because that's not happening.
I want to repeat this. I brought up the True Hoop podcast, like Henry Abbott and David Thorpe, I believe, had this conversation. I should have set that up instead of just referencing it. They had this kind of very preposterous, very clickbaity argument of the Magic. If the Magic don't believe Paolo Banchero can lead them to a title, trade him now and get an Oklahoma City ransom for him. Their point is wrong. And David Thorpe was very, very good about saying this. Is like, you spent 10 years collecting draft picks to get a Paolo Banchero. Why would you trade him to go get another Paolo Banchero? The Magic aren't doing something that crazy. The point that I thought was a good point about it was, with young players especially, the earlier you act, you don't want to make too many conclusions with young guys, but the earlier you act, the more you get back in return. So if you're looking at, like you said, no one's truly untouchable. It's just how much do you want back for them? It feels crazy to think that Jalen Suggs or Anthony Black would be on the table, but then again, you never know what pops up, and you gotta be ready and willing to act early. That was the main point from that article, or from that podcast. It's worth a listen. It's preposterous. It's stupid. Sam Presti had the Clippers over the coals when he traded Paul George. He's very good at knowing when the time is to move. And, he held all the cards. The Celtics held all the cards with the Brooklyn Nets and raked them over the coals. That's part of it. Yeah. The Magic held all the cards with the Bulls, got a really good return for Nikola Vucevic. It's about kind of power and understanding, hey, we can always walk away. So to that point, where are the Magic in terms of balancing that kind of short-term need because they are a playoff team. They want to win. They don't want to be the 7 seed. Like this is not where they want to be. And understanding that this is still a marathon and a long range planning deal.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a few things to unpack there. So
yeah, a lot.
What I think happens with a lot of teams, especially teams that have been more focused on drafting and developing players, they tend to get what I say is a little too precious with their own guys, which like this has been a criticism I've had of the Memphis Grizzlies to some extent, where you can't be so locked into we've got to keep every player because we drafted this guy. We've started to develop them where you keep them past their value, meaning, so a good example is Zaire Williams. The Grizzlies traded up for him. They kept him. They had opportunities to put him in trades. They didn't do it because they believed in him. And then eventually they had to essentially salary dump him this summer to create enough room under the luxury tax to do other stuff. That's where if you're the Magic, especially where Banchero's not going anywhere, Franz isn't going anywhere, Suggs isn't going anywhere. Wendell Carter's not going anywhere right now because he can't be traded. He's got a trade restriction until after the deadline. So he's not going anywhere. So I think if you're the Magic, if I start looking at those 4 guys, then I start looking at, all right, where's my roster at going into next year? Let me add a 5th guy, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, not going anywhere unless it was a super huge blockbuster deal we don't see coming, because you don't do that with guys you just signed as free agents. So if I'm the Magic, I'm looking at it and saying, all right, a guy like Anthony Black, who everything I'm about to say, I want in the full context of, I love Anthony Black. He's maybe my favorite player on the team. I think he's a lot of fun. I see everything he can be, and I don't get too focused on the things he isn't, because I think he's, just really, really good. But if I'm looking at it and saying, all right, for us to be the team we want to be, we're going to have those 4 guys, Banchero, Wagner, Caldwell-Pope, and Suggs. Where's the room for Anthony Black in there? Unless we're going super small ball, there just isn't that room for him to be more than maybe the 3rd guard in a 3-guard group. That's okay. That's fine, especially on his rookie scale deal. But what you can't have happen is we're now going into year 4 and didn't really develop, never really moved past anything more than the 4th guard on the team. They had to get somebody else to play in front of him or whatever it is. And now all of a sudden it's, man, our cap sheet's a little tighter than we really want it to be. We're a little more expensive than we want to be. We're moving Anthony Black because we need to re-sign player X, Y, and Z. So that's where you have to be very careful about getting too precious with your own guys. Jett Howard, right? I've liked, other than the injuries this year, I've liked some of the development we've seen from him. But again, you have to be willing to move guys like that if you want to really upgrade the team and go. So I think if I'm the Magic, I'm really now to what they can do, where they're at. I think I'm looking at it, I'm using this because this year has been such a mess. I'm using a much wider lens of, we saw last year what this team can be. The roster hasn't changed all that much. It's Caldwell-Pope's the only major difference maker, and more games out of Isaac.
More Goga Batadze, over Wendell Carter. Yeah.
But I'm also looking at that combined with, what did the playoffs tell us about our team? And that's what's so important with young teams. The playoffs tell you everything you need to know. If you have a small guard who can't really defend, playoffs are going to tell you. It might take till round 2, 3, maybe the finals, but you're going to find out when you get there. If you can't shoot, Orlando, the playoffs are going to tell you.
It is the policy of this podcast that shooting does not matter.
Well, okay, sure. So, but the players are going to tell you, right? If you can't rebound, they're going to tell you. And that's where I think the Magic need to use what you've seen this year, which I think there's a couple really good developments you've seen is Franz can be that guy, right? We feel good about that. Jump shot looks better than it did last year. That's a good thing. We've seen, all right, Suggs can kind of lead the offense. It's better if he doesn't have to, but he can if we really need him to. And that's where I think, right, and I know you deal with this on a daily basis. Everybody tries to shuffle any number of point guards to the Magic because they look at it like they really need a point guard. I don't think the team thinks that way. Actually, let me rephrase. I know they don't think that way based off all the conversations I've ever had with anybody there. They see it as our offense flows through, when healthy, Paolo and Franz. We need guys who can emphasize that. We need guys who can lift that up, guys who can be support players, guys who can be really good. There's any number of point guards you could go get that can do that because they're good off-ball players. But if you're talking traditional ball-dominant point guards, not really going to be a thing. They're probably never going to go that direction.
They don't want, there's a reason, like a lot of people pitched Chris Paul last year and even in this summer. That's not the point guard they need. Just because of the size, but B, because they don't want a guy that's directing traffic and pounding the ball into the dirt. They want to play through Paolo and Franz and let them be playmakers. They want everybody to be the point guard, essentially.
That's it. Yeah. We're a equal opportunity offense till we're not, which is going to be late in games when it's going to be Paolo and Franz and it's going to be they're creating everything for you. So that's where I think if I'm the Magic, I start to, all right, I have a big enough picture between the last year and a half to have a really good sense of what we are. We don't have enough shooting. We need more creation ability. We need more guys who can get their own shots, even when we have everybody else, right? We need more guys to be in the mix. And that's where that should start to guide your decisions on where we go. Kind of to that, I think you can do to the short versus long-term planning. If I'm the Magic, I'm not making short-term all-in moves. They're not close enough. And that's not even just because of the injuries and all that. They just weren't ready for that move yet. But you can make a move for a guy if he fits, can help right now, and he can be part of the roster and just equally as importantly, fit on the cap sheet moving forward, then 100% make that move. That's where you can go. Seems about to get pretty expensive next year. The year after, they're going to be really expensive when Paolo, Franz, and Suggs are all on their deals. You've got a couple of guys still under contract. They've got some stuff they're going to have to work through, but you can still support one more guy in the 20 to 30 million range without it getting ridiculous and saying, well, that's it. It's those 6 guys and a whole bunch of veteran minimums. You don't have to go to that extent because they structured things pretty well moving forward. But that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a move where helps us right now, but can really help us as the team continues to grow into what they become over the next couple of seasons as well.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to remember that this is, I know my listeners hate when I say this and I repeat it over and over again because winning is the goal. The Magic want to win. They want to make the playoffs. They want to advance in the playoffs. But this season is still not about this season. Their championship window is 2, maybe 3 years away. That's when they want to be competing at the highest levels. And look, it's going to take one big move to get there. I think we can all see that. And so it's about finding the right player, person, fit to attack that. You mentioned the cap sheet. I want to talk a little bit about why this is the window where the Magic have to make that move. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by our friends over at Talkspace. Therapy is really a game changer. It's a chance for you to get out there, kind of discuss your feelings, talk with someone who is in your corner to help you solve problems and think of things just a little bit differently. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be challenging. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace is the leading virtual therapy provider. It makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. And it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA and enter promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNBA, promo code SPACE80. I am joined once again by our friend Keith Smith of Spotrac as we talk the Orlando Magic at the NBA trade deadline and talk a little bit about what the Magic's goals are, what they're trying to accomplish, and where they're sitting with how just crazy this season has been so far. like we didn't really touch on this part, but certainly part of the equation here. I've told a lot of people, honestly, the most important player the Magic get at the trade deadline, regardless of whether they make a move or not, is getting Franz Wagner back. That is essentially a trade deadline acquisition. So before we talk maybe about why this is the window, I want to bring things back to kind of the granular level again. With the Magic trying to work back several players from injury, does that have an effect on whether they make a move at the deadline, considering you're working guys back into lineups, and now you might have to work in a new player into your an important new player, a starting level new player into your rotation, while Paolo's still getting back up to speed, Franz is getting back up to speed, Jalen's getting back up to speed. Is that a factor in any of these conversations?
Yeah, in general, I would normally say yes. I think because the Magic have had so many injuries, and they're not that guys haven't stepped forward and been good, because obviously they were, because they wouldn't still be in the position they're in if they weren't.
Maybe we're Philadelphia as if it was bad.
100%. That's a great example. I think the challenge for the Magic, or I guess the good thing for the Magic is, because no one has like super stepped forward into this whole new role. It's not like all of a sudden Caleb Houston is a 20 shots per night guy who's scoring, 15 points per game and is a huge part of the offense. And it's like, hey, sorry, dude, now we're going to send you back to the bench and you're not going to play very often. That hasn't been a thing. So that's where, I think it's a little bit easier to say, all right, we just go back to all the things we did in October in training camp. We go back to those things, and we just kind of, we're going back to what we did before, the sets we ran, the things we wanted to do. We're going to do some of that. Now we can also add in some wrinkles. Like, I think one of the coolest developments this year has been the amount they're using the big men as facilitators, meaning big men like Carter and Batadze, not the Banchero big man. That's, he's more of a wing. He's like a jumbo wing. Yeah, the centers. Yeah, the actual centers. You're using those guys a lot as facilitators, and you can still do that, right? You can still say, hey, we're still going to run that stuff. That's a way to make life easier on Paolo and Franz, and even Suggs and Caldwell Pope and everybody else. So I think that part becomes a little bit easier. And then, yeah, if you're adding in a new player on top of it, that's where, again, fit matters so much. If you were telling me, hey, they're going to go out and trade for, Tyrese Halliburton, and I'll use that as an example because it's ridiculous and isn't going to happen, I would be like, man, that could get kind of sideways here. It sounds awesome, but like, he needs the ball a lot. He has the ball a lot. Paolo needs the ball.
Just say De'Aaron Fox. That's why I wasn't into the De'Aaron Fox idea, is because he needs the ball in his hands a lot. Yep. He's not necessarily your system, but he's not a good enough spot up shooter to play off of Paolo and Franz. So it's a talent upgrade, but not necessarily a fit.
Yep. So that's a another good example for that too. So I think the main thing to be focused on there is, if you're adding the right kind of player, I apologize, the dog is losing his mind. It needs attention right now, apparently.
I understand that. Dogs, dogs always get priority. They know
they are he's like insistent upon it at the moment. So back to my thought, that's where it's going to be the right kind of fit guy, right? You want somebody who is a little more plug and play, right? Somebody who can, hey, we're going to slide him in. These are the things he does well. We can emphasize those things, the things maybe he doesn't do as well. Because let's face it, you're not trading for a perfect player. The things he doesn't do well, we can cover for that because of X, Y, and Z. And that's where there's, a couple guys I think would be really good fits for the Magic. And they fit all the framework we talked about previous, which is, it's got to fit now, it's got to fit long-term and all that sort of stuff. So that's where I think you need to be super cautious of what you do. It's not as much about the incorporating everybody into the lineup. In some ways, maybe you'd rather just do it all at once, rip the Band-Aid off. We're doing all of it in the next couple of weeks, period. And then when we get back from the All-Star break, we're really going to hit the ground running and we'll be ready to go. Maybe that's the best way to handle it for the Magic.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, you say that, because the Magic will be on a West Coast trip during the trade deadline. They'll finish that West Coast trip in Denver on February 6th. Then they come home, and I think they play 4 of their final 5 or 5 of their final 6 games at home entering the All-Star break. So a lot of time at home. You get more time to practice. You get more time to recover. A lot of us have kind of pegged that period after the All-Star break as when the Magic can kind of pick some steam back up, especially Franz will be back by then. Jalen Suggs might be back by then. Goga Batadze would almost certainly be back by then. They'll be back kind of to full health, have a couple games maybe on the road to get themselves going, and then we know how good this team can be at the Kia Center. I'll pick your brain for some of those names toward the end of the show, but I want to go back to that point that we were talking about before. It really does feel like this is the window for the Magic to make that, maybe not, some people call it a consolidation trade. It's probably not like an all-in, all-star type move, but to make a move that elevates the team. Because regardless of how optimistic we all are about the Magic, and I'm still very much an optimist, I still think they're going to be in the 4-5 series. It's going to be neck and neck with Indiana at this point, because Indiana also has a favorable schedule. But I do think Orlando is going to be competing for the kind of the same place in the pecking order that they were in last year, especially when they get healthy. But we can all see they need shooting desperately. Paolo and Franz's return will help them get better shots. But they are still missing the good shots they get. And they desperately need more shooting. They desperately need another creator to help them. With Mo Wagner out, they lost a lot of their bench offensive punch. They probably need another bench scorer. There are still a lot of needs for this team to address. And frankly, honestly, I would say the defense is there. They probably need another offensive-minded. They probably need some more offensive-minded players who are at least willing to defend. Just something to give their defense a little bit of a breather and just be more efficient. And some of that is, they got a lot of young guys that are still figuring themselves out. Like Anthony Black has shown a lot of signs, but he's not consistent yet. Jet Howard's been up and down. Gary Harris has been out of the lineup essentially. Cole Anthony has recovered from having a bad start to the season, but his weaknesses are very, very apparent, and they become apparent in the playoffs, especially like you mentioned. Why is this window then? We mentioned Paolo's going to get his big deal. Franz's big deal kicks in. Jalen Suggs' big deal kicks in. They're an apron. They're pretty close to the first apron as it is for next year. How important is it for the Magic to act now? Whether it's at the deadline or in the offseason. Why is now the time for that?
Yeah. So the single hardest thing I think to do when you're building a team in the NBA is when you're a rebuilding team and it is going too early, meaning going all in too early and you weren't quite ready and then it just never gets there, or you wait too late and you missed your window and now all of a sudden it's too hard to make that big move. I personally think a bit much has been made of these aprons and nobody can make trades and all that stuff. We're going to see Jimmy Butler get traded to a second apron
Everyone
team.
finds a way. It's the NBA.
Yeah, they'll figure it out, right? We're going to see a massive, probably 3 or 4 team trade with a whole lot of people moving around, and I'll have a blast breaking it all down on Spotrac and getting super nerdy with it because teams figure it out. They find a way to make it work. It's like Jurassic Park, right? Life finds a way.
Life finds a way.
So I think for the Magic, what you want to do is you just don't want to miss your window. You don't want to say, well, we just can't because we're going to be super expensive. And I'll remind everybody, yes, it's not a different ownership group, but it is different owners in charge than the last time this team was really good. But the owner, the DeVos family has paid the tax before when the Magic were good. They've never been like, hey, let's pay, hundreds of millions in the tax, because quite frankly, very few teams have done that. But they have gone into the tax before. I don't think they're going to make that a...
They learn... let me just butt in
Sure.
here. They learned their lesson from the T-Mac Grant Hill era. Like when during the T-Mac Grant Hill era, Grant Hill was an albatross because of the injuries. Like no one's fault. Just he was injured. He couldn't get back in. He literally tried to die playing for this team. He literally nearly died trying to play for this team and live up to that contract. But the front office did not want to go into the tax for a 6, 7, 8 seed. When the Magic won the finals in 2009, went to the finals in 2009. They opened up that checkbook. Like they spent exorbitantly to make the 2010 team. And honestly, to me, that is still the best team in Magic history. That team was better than the 2019. We can argue whether 95 is better or not, but I think it's really inarguable. The 2010 Magic were better than the 09 Magic. And they ran into a very good Boston Celtics team. They crumbled a little. They crumbled with home court advantage in the conference finals. They missed their shot. And And then things broke apart very, very quickly for various reasons, which we don't need to get into here. They're willing to spend, but you got to be good. And this team is on track to be very good, that they will be willing to, that by all indications, they will spend to keep together. Yeah. But again, like you mentioned, the rules are a little bit different now. It's a little bit, you gotta spend early to kind of, this is the biggest argument I made. Like, people ask me all the time, why did the Magic extend Wendell Carter? He was coming off his worst season of his career, a lot of injuries, but just not a good season. They re-signed him, and obviously he has not played well. He's had a really bad year this year. There's no getting around it. And I will tell people all the time, Wendell Carter is a fine player. He may not be what you need. It was very clear that he probably wasn't the center of the future, but you sign him to keep the salary slot. It's all about having that contract to move for when you can't take on more money. You have that contract to match and move around. And it feels like that last summer, especially when the Magic had all that cap room, they stuck with continuity, which annoys fans to some extent, but it felt like they were setting up for this period when they knew that they're going to be a little hamstrung by these new rules, by the apron, and that these are the contracts they'll have set as chess pieces on the chessboard.
Yeah, there was a point last year where the Magic, long before it was certain they were going to be a playoff team, knew Paolo, Franz, and Suggs are our guys. We're moving forward with those three guys. Everything we do now is going to orbit around them. That's how we're going to build out the roster. That's how we're going to plan the cap sheet. Franz got, my opinion. I wrote about it. I said it. He was always getting the max. This is the max you give him, without a doubt. Paolo will also get a max. And Suggs was the question is, how close do you go? And the Magic kind of flipped the script a little bit with, we're going to start you real close to the max, but then we're going to do what we like to do, which is bring your contract down. Yep, that's it. We're going to bring your contract down in the out years. Now, to that point, though, why is this the window? You gotta, if you wait too long, you're not going to have the flexibility to do it, or it's just going to get really hard to do it. So you do it now. And that's why I continue to go back to, if you can find the right move that can lift you in the 2025 playoffs and help you be, I'm not saying take you to the finals or the comp, but just you're more competitive. You're really good the rest of the regular season. You make a nice little playoff run, and and then we figure it out from there. And that guy should fit in with the team long term. That's where you should be all over making a move like that. Or should the Magic jump in and be like, hey, Jimmy Butler, you want to just move a little north? No, they should not. For many, many reasons, that's not the right move. But even if it was, hey, the Suns need to trade Bradley Beal, are you interested in that? No, they should not be interested. That's not the right kind of move for them right now. That player's not going to lift them enough to be where they are to offset a $50 million max salary. They should not necessarily be in on that. But there's a whole world of players that make between 20 and 30 million that could help the Magic, that I think start to be guys that make a lot more sense. And those are the guys I would start looking at, because can you still get them in 2 years? Sure. Yeah, you can still do it. It's just going to be a little bit harder. And then it might cost you a little bit more, because you might then be, not only you're giving up the draft picks to get the player, but you might need to be moving a contract or two that are a little sideways, a little bit underwater, and you're trying to get off of that deal as well. And that's where it just gets a little bit more tricky to make those moves. They've been very deliberate in the way they've built this roster. But again, it all kind of ties together. This is tying together my entire premise here. Can't be too precious with your own players, and you can't wait too long, because those two things combined, we're going to be sitting here doing this 2 years from now and be like, why did the Magic never get better than the 5th or 4th seed? Why did they never take that next step into real contention in the conference? What happened, to cause that? And, that'll be why. It'll be, well, remember when they could have made those moves? They waited a little too long. And that's where, and I'm not being doom and gloom, because I don't think we're anywhere near
we're far away from that. We're still a few years from
I'm nowhere near this for the Magic. But if we're there 2 years from now, that's when it starts to be, hey, Paolo kind of would like to win, and he wants to go somewhere where he can win. And Franz is tired of, he's got his contracts coming due in a couple of years. What's happening with that? And just go back and look. countless teams in league history have been exactly where the Magic are, and then they end up in that spot where, yeah, man, it just never quite happened for those guys. That's what we want to try to avoid. You can take the steps to avoiding that in the next 2 weeks ahead of the trade deadline.
Yeah, and I think that's the big key is we see the potential for this group. And so it's about solidifying that. And like, look, to your point, and I want to get into specific names here in our next segment, to your point, I don't think there is a move out there that pushes the Magic to championship. Like beyond like, Kevin O'Connor pitched a Steph Curry trade. Like if the Magic gets Steph Curry at the deadline or in the offseason, it's not going to happen. Yeah. But if that happened, the Magic are title contenders because Steph Curry's a title contender. And I would say this, he is the one star that I think would play really, one ball dominant star that I think would play really well off of what the Magic have. But that's like a short-term 2-3 year window to win championships now. Like that's
you can get Stephen Curry without trading Paolo or Franz or Suggs. You're just throwing, hey, here's every pick we have and a bunch of guys. Go get it done tomorrow.
Go do that. I'm a favor of that.
Yeah. I mean, that'd be the same thing if somebody told me like, hey, you can actually go get Anthony Edwards. All right, let's that changes the whole calculus on things, right? But I always like to remind people we still live in reality.
Yeah, this isn't 2K. You can't do the computer override. But to the point I'm trying to make is ultimately the ticket for the Magic to be a championship team is for Paolo and Franz to continue to develop into all-star and all-NBA players. They very much seem like they are on that track with how they played for most of this season. Paolo's looked a little rough at times coming back from the injury. Franz looked really, really good early on before his injury. We don't really know. But ultimately, that's the ticket to title contention. And what you're trying to do is to find guys that can support and help them be the best versions of themselves. Yep. So we're 2 weeks to the deadline. Let's talk names. I'm curious who you're thinking. I've got a few guys that I'm thinking we're going to not make fake trades, but we're going to kind of give an idea of the kind of players the Magic are looking for coming up here in just a moment. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. I love going to live events. I've got a big event, at least for me, on my calendar, going to go see Jurassic Park in concert at the Dr. Phillips Center. You'd think like a Orlando Philharmonic at the Dr. Phillips Center wouldn't be on Game Time, wouldn't be listed in a site like Game Time, but guess what? It is. That's where I got my tickets to see my favorite movie scored live. It's the best. Whether you're looking for shows, concert, theater, or games, because there's plenty of games going on, including, I guess, the NFL Pro Bowl, Game Time is your place. And they've made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. I'm joined once again by Keith Smith of Spotrac as we get ready for the trade deadline 2 weeks away. And obviously, a lot of this discussion has been really focused on giving the Magic a short-term boost, but really looking at long-term prospects. I've said this many, many times as well. The Magic are trying to thread this very, very fine needle. They want to win now. They want to be in the playoffs. They want to continue advancing in the playoffs, but they also want to continue developing their young roster. They want to give a Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner latitude to make mistakes. They're very comfortable letting them figure out the limits of their game. Obviously, we've talked a lot about young players and when you maybe, I don't want to say give up, but how you value young players, especially considering your goals of eventually competing for a championship. We're obviously 2 weeks to the deadline. I think I am coming around to the idea and argument that the Magic, in order to accomplish their short-term goals, do need to add something to this team. They do need, especially off the bench without Mo Wagner. I think if Mo Wagner's still there, they're okay. They need some scoring off the bench. They've lost a lot of scoring punch off the bench. It used to be one of their superpowers. They obviously need three-point shooting. The three-point shooting has been a disaster this year. They are I don't know if you know this. This is Magic Doom trivia. The Magic are shooting 30-point-something% from three. Only one team in Magic franchise history has shot worse. Can you name them?
Oh, God. It's probably way back in the 90s.
It is way back in the 90s. It is way back in the 80s, the 89, 92.
Yeah.
Can you guess how many they shot like 29-point-something%. Can you guess how many attempts per game they had?
Oh, probably like 3 or 4.
4.5.
Yeah.
Like the Magic currently have the worst 3-point field goal percentage by a team since the 2013 Charlotte Bobcats, I believe. It's
bad.
It's bad. I don't necessarily think it's tactics, because if you look at their shot profile, yes, they're getting a lot of open shots because teams don't care about defending at the 3-point line. They're getting a lot of corner threes still, especially since Paolo came back. They're getting the shots you want. They're just not making them. Like, it's, again, who can blame? They went out and got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope in the offseason, one of the best shooters in the league. He happened to have one of his worst shooting seasons since his rookie year.
Yep.
He's shooting 40% from three over his last 10 games. I'm not gonna say I think he's turned the corner. I think he's reliable again. But yeah, it's bad out there. I think getting Jalen Suggs more spot up threes with Paolo and Franz on the ball more is going to help a lot. I think they'll end up the worst 3-point shooting team in the league. I don't think they'll end up historically the worst 3-point shooting team in the league, or of modern history at least. They'll recover enough to be passable toward the end of the season, but it's very clear to me they need some offensive punch. The defense is fine. It will be fine, provided they're healthy. They need some offensive punch. If the Magic have to make a deal at the deadline, who's the number one guy on your wish list?
Yeah, my number one guy is Cam Johnson.
Okay.
I think Cam Johnson gives them a lot of versatility because of his size. So there are other guys they could pursue. And we could get into a couple other guys. But
I'll give you my top name. I'll give you my top name at least.
I think Cam Johnson really fits, because I think what you want to be able to do is just feel good about putting him on the floor with Paolo, with Franz, with Jalen Suggs. And you can do that. You could do that in lineups where you play those guys as the 4 perimeter players around a big, or you could even do that in lineups where Paolo slides up and plays the 5, and you kind of go with a super small ball group that is because we need to juice the offense. I'm not saying you start that or anything, but just at moments. I think Cam Johnson, he's a guy who can do enough off the dribble, but he's also not somebody who is, I need 20 shots a game. It's going to be, I can play off guys. He's played off guys his entire career. He's maintained really good efficiency on a Brooklyn team where, quite frankly, he's asked to do far too much. He has looked his best in the games where D'Angelo Russell is there kind of setting him up, or games where Ben Simmons has played and played well and is setting him up, or Dennis Schroeder was setting him up. That's what he does really well. And that's why I would go for him. His contract is also very acquirable for the Magic. Now, people say, all right, well, how do you get there, right? I had a conversation with someone just the other day. My thing is, all right, well, you have a couple paths if you're the Magic to a guy like Cam Johnson, a guy who's making, let's call it mid-20s in salary. The easy path is something like Cole Anthony and Gary Harris, and then you're probably going to have to give up a pick or two. Good thing is the Magic have that extra pick from the Nuggets. It's not super juicy, but
they don't need
fine.
It.
Also, too, if I'm the Magic, I'm starting to look at my draft pick board a little bit and saying, an awful lot of guys signed the contracts here. I don't need to be in a position to have to trade a first-round pick because I can't roster the guy. Or I have to draft a draft and stash guy because we just don't have a spot for him. I don't want to paint myself into a corner with that. So I'd be a little more willing to, if the Nets are going to hold to, we need 2 firsts, or we need a first and a young player. Well, the Magic can get there. You can get there with Cole Anthony, Gary Harris. Another option, and I'll just throw this out because this works in any of the trade constructions I'm going to throw out for guys. Mo Wagner could be a guy I would look at trading. Here's why. He's not going to help you the rest of the year. He's out for the season. Is that harsh? Yeah, it's 100% harsh, but life happens, right? That's how it works. And I think what's really important to note is if the other team acquired him and was like, hey, we're just going to let your contract expire. Let's say it was the Nets. And they're like, you can sit on our injured list, an inactive list, just as easy as you could in Orlando. And at the end of the year, we're going to decline your team option. You know what Orlando does? Hi, Mo, want to come back? We know you had to go sit and watch games in Brooklyn. Or maybe the Nets say, don't even come here. Stay where it's warm. Stay in Orlando and hang out. Just stay there. As long as they don't waive him, that's where it could get messy for reacquiring him. But if his contract just expires, you can just get him back. He can, because his contract expires, becomes a free agent, he can sign with a team. We have great precedents in this very recently. Ricky Rubio did this, where the Cavs traded him as an injured player to the Pacers to get Karis LeVert. And then when Rubio's contract expired, he re-signed with the Cavs. Now, went a little wonky because he ended up retiring. But if I'm Mo Wagner, all right, sure. And I'm not, people are like, yeah, but don't you run the risk of making Franz mad? Could you make Mo mad? I would hope they would just understand, hey, this is just business. Still gets paid his full amount and you go there. That's just another way without getting rid of a rotation player. Because I get it if Jeff Weltman and especially Jamal Mosley was like, hey, this ridiculously injured team, we don't need to be trading away healthy depth that we have, at least to do this, do these semi-consolidation trades. But that's another path to it if you needed to go that way. And that's something I would be open to. And I think Cam Johnson, why I like him, I talked about his on-court fit. His contract fits really well because you would be giving up a couple contracts to go get him. Are you going to be a little deeper into the tax? Sure, but that's something you can figure out down the line if you need to.
Yeah, and kind of to that point about young players, the joke that I've been making when people bring up Cam Johnson, at least when he's playing well, is I say, well, we have a Tristan da Silva at home. Tristan da Silva is going to need a little bit more development time. He's not as big as Cam Johnson. But if you're again, you talk about valuing young players. If all you see is Tristan da Silva becoming Cam Johnson, go get your Cam Johnson now. I do get that sentiment. And, if Brooklyn wants a young player who can contribute a little bit, but still grow, I know people hate the Courtney Lee. I think people have made some Courtney Lee comparisons to Tristan da Silva. That's what the Magic literally did with Courtney Lee. He had a great rookie season, got them to the finals. Vince Carter became available, and the Nets said, give us Courtney Lee. He's a nice young player. And that's how the Magic got, or the New Jersey Nets at the time. That's how the Magic got Vince Carter. And that was a huge move that elevated the Magic and was a really good all-in move. And they got Ryan Anderson in that deal anyway.
We may turn this into throwback Magic. We're talking about the 90s teams and great teams of the past. And now Courtney Lee.
We're getting they're getting this group primed for, again, like look at the moves those teams made. The Magic dumped a bunch of first round picks with Scott Skiles to clear the cap room for Horace Grant. The good teams follow what they do.
Sure.
My top target and I agree with you. I think the most likely trade deadline trade package is Gary Harris and Cole Anthony. Essentially, I think what the idea there is, Gary Harris has been out of the lineup. I know that when he plays, he is okay. He's essentially an injured player that you're not getting very much out of. And I don't think he disrupts chemistry if you're losing him, to be perfectly honest. He's a good veteran, not a bad guy. I think he's a fine player when he plays. Cole Anthony is kind of the guy you have to give up because of the salary, because he doesn't fit long-term. But he's an emotional center of this team. He's been really important for the Magic to stay afloat. I do think there would be some hesitation to give up on him, not give up on him, but to give him up regardless of who you're bringing back in. But, again, business is business. The Magic have to start making some decisions on some of these guys here pretty soon. My top target of the trade deadline is Collin Sexton. I like him because
next on my list.
Yeah, I like him because he is a point guard who is not a point guard. He can handle the ball a little bit. He can attack downhill. He's been a great spot up shooter in Utah this year. He's really developed as a 3-point shooter. I still think about him from the 5-on-3 game he had at Alabama against Minnesota. We know he's a really good competitor. I think he is a really good culture fit for this team. He'll probably cost you certainly one first-round pick in addition to Cole and Gary, but the math works just on that alone. And so, to me, I think the biggest need the Magic have is they need guys who can do more offensively. Like the way I describe this Magic team, and I'm curious if you think this way too, when the puzzle's complete, it looks really good. All the pieces fit really well together. Everyone understands their role. They play their roles really well. when you take out a piece of that puzzle, it starts to get wobbly. Like we didn't know when Paolo went out, we didn't know if Franz could step up and be the guy. And thankfully he was able to do that. But when you look down the rest of the roster, like the lineups when Franz was out and Jalen Suggs was in by himself didn't look that great. And then when Franz goes out, like, yeah, they played really hard. Effort makes up for a lot of mistakes. Even Jalen Suggs' injury, the ship was starting to take on a little water. And so to me, especially without Mo Wagner, who is probably the only like offense only guy on the team, the Magic needs someone that can randomly drop 25 who isn't one of their top 3 guys. They need someone who can get hot and just take over a game. If Jalen Suggs has to miss a game because he flung himself into somebody and messed up his back again, someone that can slide in and not have too much of a drop-off. There's just too much of a drop-off, especially offensively, between the Magic's top 3 guys and everybody else. And so if I'm Orlando, and Cam Johnson, I think, helps with this too, although I don't think he's as good off the dribble. If I'm Orlando, that's my focus, is find me some guys that can layer off the offense a little bit and make sure this team consistently has scoring.
Yeah, I like Sexton too because he can start. He can come off the bench. As long as he's getting his 25 to 30 minutes a night, it doesn't matter. You can play him next to Suggs. You can play him next to Caldwell Pope. Again, he's super flexible. I love his contract for the Magic and where they're going. That fits very nicely because you're not, especially if it was something like Anthony and Harris, you're not really taking on any extra money in the future years with that. So you're in a spot where you feel pretty good about that. I don't know, because it's Danny Ainge, I don't know that you get out without giving up one of the kids. But Ainge might be like, all right, give me Jet Howard so I can at least sell him taking a flyer on another kid here. Because I don't know how much another pick, given what they just did, is going to really sell for them. They might want, hey, give us a player that we can go forward with. But yeah, he's a good pick. I'll give you 2 more quick ones because I kind of see them as similar-ish players. They make similar-ish money. And it's all the same points with Sexton, where they could start, they could come off the bench. Anthony Simons, the hometown kid, right? Everybody knows.
So make sure we ask about him.
Yep. And then Malcolm Brogdon is the other guy because former 6th man of the year. He's been very good throughout his career, playing on or off ball. Again, those guys, much like Sexton, much like Johnson, they can come out and get you 25 in a game if they're hot and things are going well. And again, they're not going to be guys who are going to eat up usage and touches away from Paolo and Franz or even Suggs. Both of those guys, much like Sexton, they can fit alongside them. They can play behind them. You can fit them with Caldwell Pope. Those are the kind of moves I think you're looking at a little bit more. And then both of those guys, again, contracts, not too big to be crazy. We're not talking Zach LaVine here, where, that would get, are there moves you could tell me the Magic traded for Zach LaVine? And I would be like, all right, I kind of get it. And I kind of like it. Sure. Zach,
but that's your all in. That's your team for the next
but that'd
4
be
years.
it. Right. And then that's it, right? Now that's kind of my team. Whatever your resulting team is, that's it. These guys that we talked about, Johnson, Sexton, Simons, Brogdon, these are short-term moves that help you right now. They can help you beyond this season, but they're also not guys that it's like, crap, now we're locked in forever.
If it doesn't work, you can get yourself out.
Yep. Yeah. You could get yourself out of it and move yourself on from some of these guys. Those are just the guys. Some of those are names that every Magic fan has brought up 100 times themselves. Right. And it's funny having the Spotrac trade machine. We can pull data now on what people are doing. And some of these names are the ones the Magic fans are constantly trading for. There we can see that. When I say pull data, we don't know who you are. We don't know where you're from. We just know it's Magic involved in a trade.
There's an odd number of people trying to get Collin Sexton on the Magic.
Yes.
It's very strange.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
Now, you still have about 5 billion trade combinations to go to catch the Lakers, but that's okay. I mean, that's
okay. We understand that.
So
the Lakers aren't one. We know the Lakers aren't one of those trying to make those combinations, apparently.
Exactly. So those are the kind of guys I'm looking at, right? All of them. Number one thing they all have in common: more shooting, more offense. I think all the guys. I don't want the Magic to just add a shooter there are guys you could go target that can really just shoot, but I think you want to be very careful to add guys who could do a little bit more than that, where
They're
they're
not
not
going for like
just
Luke Kennard, who's just a
yeah.
straight shooter, going to be a defensive
And
liability.
if we
Like
get
the Magic,
that,
the Magic aren't at a point where they want to sacrifice. I mean, and this is my
correct.
concern with Simons. I know a lot of Magic fans love Simons. My concern with Simons is the Magic don't want to sacrifice their defense for
Yeah.
offense yet. They're not there yet.
That's why I
They
think
might have to get there, but they're not there.
that's why I think him and Sexton, you could bring them in alongside Caldwell Pope and
Mhm.
Suggs, as long as they're on the floor, one of those two. And you have the bigs who can defend. You have Paolo and Franz, who are both good defenders. You're fine.
Yeah.
Those guys aren't so bad until you get to conference
Playoffs.
finals, NBA
Yeah.
finals. And guess what? If we're there, all right, then we'll figure it
learn.
out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I think that the last point I would make too with those guys is I like the idea that if injuries do hit or continue to hit, these are guys who can also scale up a little bit too. If for your example, if we get to trade deadline day and at 2:30, it breaks the Magic are acquiring Luke Kennard for Gary Harris and a second round pick. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Like it's gonna help. It's not gonna be awful. Like that's fine. But I want this team to make more than just it's fine.
They should
move.
they
Like
should
let's
be
do
thinking
something
bigger.
bigger.
They
Yes.
should be thinking bigger. It's
Yep.
it's
100%.
time to think bigger. Like I wrote about this on the Locked On Magic Daily newsletter a few days ago, that the continuity era is over. It's time to think, how do we actually make this team better so that we can be a top 4 team? Because the Magic were sitting in the 4 seed and they might be better than the Bucks. I'm 50-50 on it. We need a playoff series to find out. But nobody
It
around
might definitely be better than them if the Bucks
Yeah.
move forward with acquiring Bradley Beal. I don't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
understand
Um,
what that's all about, but
but-
that's a whole other show.
That's a whole other show. But nobody around the league considers the Magic title contenders. Like no one thinks they are a threat to the Cavs, Knicks, and Celtics.
Yeah.
And that's, one game, sure, they can win. A best of 7 series. Look, the Magic got to game 7 against Cleveland last year. Some of that is JB Bickerstaff. No offense to him, done a great job in Detroit. That team outgrew him. Some of that was certainly Jared Allen was hurt. And Jared Allen got hurt in game 2, played game 3, didn't play the rest of the series. Big factor in that series. We can't ignore that. The Magic have to find a way to be title contenders, and they aren't there yet, plain and simple. And so now it's, how do we get there?
Yep. And that's it. You don't need to do the all-in move, the Zach LaVine kind of move or anything like that. Again, there are constructions. I would not hate it if they did that. I would fully get it, why they may do that. But these are all moves where you're not sacrificing everything you have, not sacrificing anything you built. You just made yourself better for right now, and you make yourself better down the line. That's where that's what I'm targeting. Guys who fit long term. And then you know what? Then another year of playoff data, another year of seeing what you do. That's when we start to get into, all right, what is it we got to do? Boy, it would hurt to trade player X, but if we get player Y back, it's going to feel really good when we're competing for a championship. And those questions will reveal themselves, and those answers can come down the line. But right now, make it better today, make it a little bit better tomorrow. That's all we really need to do.
Yep. I think that is the perfect place to close things. Keith, it is always great to have you on here. We always have you like right before the big transaction window. So we appreciate that and appreciate your insight on the Orlando Magic. Tell everyone where they can find you and your writing as we enter the final countdown here to the trade deadline.
Yeah, if you like all this kind of stuff, but you want to look at it league-wide, Magic included, Spotrac.com. I've got a trade primer that's going to go up here fairly soon. It covers all 30 teams. We'll let you know where they at with the tax and the cap and the aprons and what draft picks do they have to trade. What about exceptions? What do they have left? Who's the most likely guy to get traded? I went through all 30 teams, put that together. I've been breaking down every trade as they happen, pretty close to as soon as we know the final details, but we've already had several. So those are already up and posted on the site. If you want to go back and look at those, I've got buyers and sellers articles coming here as a little trade deadline breaking it all down. Then if you're more of a podcast YouTube person, NBA Front Office Show, Trevor Lane and I, every day, Monday through Friday, we go live. If you really want to hang out and get super nerdy, we're going live for trade deadline, probably a couple hours before the deadline. We'll be live through the deadline, having a lot of fun, just reacting to what we hope will be a whole lot of things happening live as they happen. But you can check us out there, NBA Front Office Show on YouTube. We'd love to have you.
Yep, absolutely. Keith is an invaluable resource to all of us here, just sorting through all the cap things. I'm going to need you to teach me first apron rules very, very soon. I've been ignoring them because it has not been something I've needed to worry about for the last decade. And now I have to learn all these new rules very, very shortly. Keith, as always, thank you very much for hopping on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I want to thank Keith once again for coming on to the show, discussing where the Magic are sitting and help us get ready for the trade deadline. The trade deadline, again, is just 2 weeks away, coming up on February 6th. The Magic will be in Denver that day. Could make for another very low roster availability day against Denver, but we'll see where the Magic are at. And obviously that still feels like very far away. A lot of games to get to before then, including that entire West Coast trip. So 8 games or 7 games until trade deadline day. So just something to keep in mind. A lot of data to still collect as the Magic decide how they move forward. I want to thank Keith again, but that's going to do it for me today. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Find me on Blue Sky at PhilipRR. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all of them sell podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. And for even more Orlando Magic content, be sure to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. As always, thank you for your support. As if all that's not enough, your favorite podcast, which is us, now has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Magic Daily newsletter, the one stop for ultimate team and league coverage, delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Magic newsletter. That's going to do it for me today, though. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about the Orlando Magic's game against Portland Trailblazers. Until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.